Hello and welcome back to a new video on my channel. In this video, I would like to talk about the Skywatcher 150-750 PDS Newtonian telescope. So I've been using this telescope over the past few years and I'm really happy with this telescope, and in this video I would like to share my experience with you. So if you're planning to buy that specific telescope, this video will definitely be helpful to you. So in this video I would like to begin by introducing the telescope to you, which means that I would like to talk about a few basic details about the telescope, such as the focal length, the aperture, the included accessories. So actually all of those things you need to know when buying that specific telescope for deep sky astrophotography. After that, I would like to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using that telescope, and in the end I would like to show you a few images I've captured with that telescope over the past few years. So images of galaxies, nebulae, star clusters, so all of those deep sky objects. And in the end I would like to talk about whether I would recommend the telescope or not. So if you're interested in buying the telescope, definitely make sure to watch this entire video. But before we start, I would like to mention that this video is not sponsored and I'm not being paid for it, so all products shown in this video were purchased by myself. As I mentioned in the beginning, I would like to start by introducing the telescope to you. So here we go. So first of all, something about the telescope itself. In astrophotography there are different types of telescopes, but in this case we do have reflector telescope. So there are a lot of different types of telescopes in astrophotography, but the two main options are reflector telescopes and refractor telescopes. So those refractor telescopes, they do have lenses built inside, and those reflector telescopes do have a built-in mirror. There are different types of telescopes, but these two types of telescopes are the main types. So this one is a reflector telescope, which means that there is a built-in mirror. So there is one mirror built in there. So there's the main mirror here in the back. You can see the telescope bit here, the mirror bit here. Here in the back there's a glass, and behind that there is the main mirror. Here in the front there is another mirror built inside. You can't see it right now because it's built inside the telescope. When buying a telescope for astrophotography, there are different aspects that are very important. But the most important aspects are the focal length and the aperture of the telescope, because they are very important. The aperture is very important because it helps you to collect even more light, and that's very important. And on the other side, the focal length is important as well, because a longer focal length means that you will be able to capture smaller objects. So longer focal length means that you can use a higher magnification, which is important in astrophotography. In this case, this telescope does have an aperture of 150 millimeters, which means that the diameter of the telescope is 150 millimeters. Furthermore, this telescope does have a focal length of 750 millimeters. 750 millimeters is quite a lot when comparing it to those refractor telescopes, because usually those refractor telescopes are wide field telescopes. So they are usually they do not have that much of magnification. For sure there are other telescopes, other refractor telescopes with a longer focal length, so more than 1000 millimeters, but usually those refractor telescopes are wide field telescopes. For sure there are those telescopes that are bigger with a long focal length, for sure. But in this case we do have a focal length of 750 millimeters, which is great because you can capture almost all objects. For sure there is not a telescope that is suitable for all of those objects out there in space, but with around 750 millimeters you can capture a lot of objects. So you can capture the moon and planets for sure. For sure, when capturing planets, more magnification, more focal length would be better, but you can even use a barrel lens in this case, so in combination with a telescope, which helps you to achieve a longer focal length. But 750 millimeters is great for deep sky astrophotography because you can capture nebulae, galaxies, so even smaller objects. For sure, for some objects, the focal length might not be enough, but there are also very big objects in the night sky, such as the Andromeda galaxy. In this case, you can even create or capture a mosaic image of this region, which helps you to include even those bigger objects in the night sky. So this aperture and this focal length results in a focal ratio of f5, which actually means how fast your telescope is in collecting light. So around f5.0 is great for astrophotography. In my opinion, 150 millimeters of aperture and 750 millimeters of focal length is great for astrophotography. Furthermore, the telescope is not that heavy compared to other telescopes, so around 5.5 kilograms. Looking at the internet, you will find different numbers. Some would say 4.9 kilograms, but in my case it's 5.5 kilograms without the finder scope and without an eyepiece attached to the telescope. So only telescope. In my case, I've attached different accessories to a telescope, but I would like to show you them later on. Something about the size, because that's important as well. In this case, the telescope does have a length of 680 millimeters and a diameter of 182 millimeters. So it's not that big, but it's not that small as well. So when there are only a few hours of total clear skies, usually I set up my other telescope because this one is a bit too heavy for me, but still it's quite portable, definitely. So it's not that heavy, not that big, but compared to a wide field telescope, it's for sure a bit bigger, but there are definitely other Newtonian telescopes that are much heavier. Something about the focuser, so I'm talking about the PDS version of this telescope. So as you can see out there, it's the 150 PDS Newtonian telescope. In this case, you will get a dual speed focuser. And that is something that I really like about that telescope, because a dual speed focuser is very helpful in astrophotography, because it helps you to focus on the stars easier. So I personally focus on the stars, so I increase the ISO value, and then I zoom in on the stars. And when using a Newtonian telescope, you will see the spikes of the stars, and then I'm focusing on these spikes, on the spikes of the stars. And in this case, the dual speed focuser is very great, because when using a normal focuser, or when you're moving the focuser on a little bit, the focus will change a lot. But in this case, the focuser is moving very slowly, which makes focusing so much easier. So I've used two different Newtonian telescopes over the past few years, one with normal focuser, in this case with a dual speed focuser, and this dual speed focuser is definitely a must-have. It's amazing. So I really recommend using this telescope with a dual speed focuser. Something about the included accessories. In this case, you will get the main telescope and you will get different accessories. So on the one hand, you will get an eyepiece, a 28mm eyepiece. It is a very wide field. So 28 millimeters is a very wide field. I bought different eyepieces to observe even smaller objects, so 9mm, 4mm, and 12, I guess. So when buying the telescope and you do not have other eyepieces, I would definitely recommend to buy a collection so that you do have different eyepieces. Furthermore, you will get a finder scope. In this case, the finder scope does have a diameter of 30 millimeters and magnification of 6 times. It's not that good for finding objects in a night sky, but in this case, I'm using a go-to mount. Therefore, I only use that finder scope for the star alignment. So when using the go-to mount, I'm using the star alignment, and then the telescope is moving towards the object, and then you will already see the star through your finder scope, which makes finding those stars very easy. But when you're looking for deep sky objects or other objects, planets, it might be a bit challenging because you do have a lot of magnification. In this case, I would recommend using a Telrad finder scope because that makes finding those objects easier. I've already made a video about that one. You can click on the video right there. But in this case, I'm using a go-to mount, and I'm usually controlling this entire setup with this Astro computer, so the CW ASI Air Pro, and therefore I do not need the finder scope right now because I'm using this Astro computer to find these objects. But the finder scope is still very good. It's very good, but sometimes it might be challenging to find objects in the night sky. Furthermore, you will get an adapter when buying the telescope. So it's a 2-inch focuser, which means that you can attach 2-inch eyepieces. But perhaps you would like to capture images of planets, for example, and then you can use an adapter, because this is my guide scope, for example, and in the back of the guide scope I've attached my guiding camera. I also use that camera for planetary imaging, so it's the CWO ASI 120mm mini mono guiding cam, so it's a mono cam, and with that adapter you can even attach those cameras to your telescope, or even smaller eyepieces. So this is actually a thing I'd like to mention about the telescope. Now I would like to show you a few images I've captured with that telescope, because that's usually the best option to show you how good this telescope is in collecting light. The first image I would like to show to you is an image that I've captured of the Orion Nebula. So here we go. So this is an image that I've captured with this telescope of the Orion Nebula. It was captured in combination with a coma corrector. So you can see that the stars are perfectly round even in the edges of this image. The star quality is very good. In this case, you can see that the stars are not looking that perfect. Therefore, I've attached a main mirror mask, which helps me to improve the spikes of the stars. So this is something I would definitely recommend to you when you're planning to buy that telescope, because it helps you to achieve better star imaging quality. But as you can see, you are definitely able to achieve great images with that telescope for sure, and it's definitely good. The image definitely looks quite good. In this case, I used the coma corrector, I used the Maxfield coma corrector, and this is something I would definitely recommend. So when using a telescope, definitely make sure to use the coma corrector. As a comparison, I would like to show you an image that I've captured of the Dumbbell Nebula M27. In this case, I haven't used the coma corrector. This image is already a cropped image, but even when zooming into the corners, you can still see that these spikes are not looking that good. So it look like a bit like comets, and therefore I always recommend you using coma corrector because that helps you to correct the image, and that helps you to achieve perfect star imaging quality even in these outest regions of your image. That's very important because then you can use the entire framing or the entire field of view of your telescope. That's very important. So even the very first image I've captured with a telescope of the Andromeda Galaxy, in this case you can see these comets even better. So these are not comets, but the stars look like comets. So the star quality is not that good. So you can see this image is as well cropped, but even the stars are not that good. So you can definitely see that. Here in the center of the image, the stars are better, but usually when you're not using coma corrector, you need to crop the entire field of view, which is not that good. Another image I would like to show you is an image I've captured of the Pleiades star cluster. So, I mean, the images look good. It's a great telescope to use for deep-scale astrophotography. Another image is an image of a double star cluster. In this case, you can see that the telescope is very good in achieving or in capturing good images of stars, definitely. In this case, I've used coma corrector once again. As you can see, this is the entire field of view. The last image I would like to show to you is an image I've captured of the Triangulum Galaxy M33. It is a great image as well, so it definitely shows that this telescope is quite good in capturing images of galaxies or nebulae. Now I would like to talk a bit about the pros and cons of using the telescope for deep-sky astrophotography. First of all, I'd like to talk about the pros of using a telescope. The very first aspect I would like to talk about is the price. So it's not that expensive compared to other telescopes, therefore it's a great way to get started into astrophotography. It's not that expensive, it's quite easy to use, although you need to collimate the mirrors of a telescope, but this is something you will learn quite fast, so it's not that challenging, you can definitely do so. And so it's a great telescope. It's easy to use, as I mentioned. It's not that heavy, which makes it a rather portable telescope. For sure, that depends. Other people who are using wide field telescope, they say it's not portable. For sure, that depends on which telescopes you have used in the past. For sure, because some people, because there are other Newtonian telescopes that are much heavier. In this case, this is a portable Newtonian telescope. The aperture and focal length is great to capture almost all objects, as I mentioned. Great focal ratio of f5.0. It's good in collecting light of deep sky objects, planets. As I mentioned, the dual speed focuser is a great advantage of using that telescope for deep sky astrophotography because it makes focusing so much easier. Yeah, still you need to make a few upgrades when using the telescope, such as including a main mirror mask and a few other options, but the main mirror mask is, in my opinion, one of the most important upgrades you need to make when buying that telescope. About the cons, so far I've not found a lot of cons about using the telescope. I'm really happy with the telescope and I would definitely recommend it. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video is not sponsored and I'm not being paid for it. So all products shown in this video purchased by myself. That about the telescope. As I mentioned in the beginning, it is not that heavy. Still, I have attached multiple components to the telescope in order to use it for deep sky astrophotography, so in my case it's a bit heavier. So this is a telescope the way I'm using it right now. So I've attached different components to a telescope to make it suitable for astrophotography. So I've attached a guide scope here at the back of the telescope. So as you can see in the back of the telescope, I've attached a guide scope. So it's a big pro of the telescope because attaching a guide scope to a telescope is very easy. So this is the guide scope I've attached to a telescope. It's a 60mm guide scope. And the back I've attached my guiding cam. It's already a planetary. It's as well a planetary imaging camera. It's the CWO ASI 120mm mini mono guiding cam. Furthermore, I've attached the CW ASI Pro right there. So it's this Astro computer. And at the front, I usually attach my camera. So I'm usually using the Canon EOS 2000D, but sometimes I'm using the Canon EOS 600D as well. So in this case, it's a bit heavier, but still it's quite portable. It's heavier, but still it's quite nice using that one for deep sky astrophotography. So this is actually everything I've planned to say about that telescope. I'm really happy with that telescope. I really like using that one for deep sky astrophotography. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask me down below in the comments. I will definitely help you. If you're using that telescope, feel free to write your opinion about that telescope down below in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, clear skies, Felix.